Michael and Heather Jones had a volatile relationship. Well, actually, they had volatile lives. Heather had been shot twice, once accidentally by herself and then again by her husband, Michael. That second time ended with police arresting Michael for the incident, but while there, police would learn that a more gruesome crime had happened at the home. This is Monsters. Adrian Jones was born on May 15, 2008 in Kansas City, Kansas, and his family called him AJ. His parents were Michael Jones and Diana Pierce, and their relationship didn't last. It seems that Michael left Diana either around the time that Adrian was born or shortly after. Adrian lived with his mother for the first few years of his life, but when he was 2 years old, the Department of Child and Family Services investigated a report that Adrian wasn't being supervised properly, and the social workers found that he and other children were being left alone in the house. It was determined that Diana was guilty of neglect, and Adrian was removed from her home and sent to live with his father. Unfortunately, they pulled the boy out of one bad situation and placed him in an even worse situation. By then, Michael had married a woman named Heather, and they eventually had 6 other children living with them. Despite there already having been reports against that household, Child Services decided it would be a better place for Adrian than his mother's home. 2 months before Adrian was placed in the care of Michael and Heather, someone reported that there were, quote, guns all over the house, and no food in the cupboards. Now, whether or not you believe citizens have the right to own guns doesn't matter. If you're going to have them, you should keep them in a secure place where children don't have access to them. That was not the case in the Jones household, and reports said that the guns were loaded, which is completely irresponsible and makes it baffling why social workers would send a child to live there. On top of that, there were multiple reports of drugs and abuse in the home, claiming Heather smoked meth in front of the children. All of that was backed up by reports of Heather getting high and one time accidentally shooting herself in the foot. They sent Adrian to live there anyway. Even if he needed to be removed from Diana's custody, there was zero reason to believe that his father's home would be an appropriate place for Adrian, and it would only get worse. The Department of Child and Family Services almost immediately started getting told by the children in the home about abuse by both Michael and Heather. They did say that Adrian received more abuse than any of the other children, though. One child said she heard the stepmother choke Adrian and that it sounded, quote, like he was dead. Once Adrian was spanked so severely that his buttocks were bleeding. The couple made claims that Adrian was a problem, describing him wetting the bed and stealing food. Now, this is yet another story where adults would claim the child was being bad by stealing food, only to later reveal they were actually starving them. Seriously, your kid's not stealing food, they're trying to stay alive. Adrian himself was interviewed, and he told social services that his father punched and kicked him. He openly told authorities about the abuse he was suffering, and he was still not removed from the home. It seemed that at some point social workers had determined that the abuse from Heather was more severe than that of Michael, and since the two had separated, DCFS agreed to let the children remain in the care of Michael as long as he didn't allow Heather access to them and if he followed a safety plan. Of course, like in many volatile relationships, the couple just got back together and they didn't notify DCFS when that happened. They continued to have reports filed against them, but the agency claimed that because the family moved back and forth across the Kansas-Missouri border, it made it hard to keep track of the case. At the same time, the agencies didn't seem to make any effort to keep track of the children. Being an area where people regularly go back and forth from one state to the other, you'd think they had some sort of system where they cooperated to ensure children were continuing to be protected even if their families crossed state lines, but there was nothing like that. If a family under investigation moved into another state, the prior agency just dropped the case. Then the new state started a new case from the beginning. When the Joneses moved to Missouri, they started homeschooling the children, which we know tends to be a cover so abusive parents can keep their abuse hidden. When children attend public school, teachers, staff, and other students are bound to notice a child with bruises or one who's becoming alarmingly thin. If you just claim you're homeschooling them, you can abuse them all you want and nobody will be the wiser. In many U.S. states, there are surprisingly few regulations for homeschooling, and most of them are easily manipulated. All of the children were isolated and abused, but Adrian got the worst of it. It's likely because the other children were either Heather's or children that Michael and Heather had together. Leaving Adrian as the outsider who was not blood related to Heather meant he was not deserving of any fair treatment. The parents used torture-like stress positions to punish him. Pictures found by investigators showed Adrian strapped to an inversion table. In one photo, he had cutting boards strapped to his front and back to make him stand straight and limit his movement. Other times he would be handcuffed with his hands above his head. These types of positions place a majority of the person's body weight on just a few muscles to cause extreme discomfort. Heather would later admit that she kept Adrian in those positions for most of the day. Hours and hours of him being strapped to boards with elastic bandages. Some nights they would force Adrian to stay outside in the cold all night, and if that wasn't bad enough, they would sometimes make him crouch down in the pool so all that was out of the filthy water was his head. Videos showed him being taunted with food. He had his hands restrained with a bar of soap shoved into his mouth. His parents would set food on the end of the soap just out of reach. Even when he was free within the house, there were alarms on the refrigerator and the cupboard to ensure he couldn't sneak food. That was all the long-term abuse on top of individual instances of harm. Adrian was beaten, saying both adults punched him in the head and stomach. He was also sometimes beaten with a broom handle, and he was tased for up to 20 seconds at a time. I'm going to pause for 20 seconds, and I want you to imagine you're 7 years old and being hit with a taser that entire time. That's a long time. Heather would claim that they needed to discipline Adrian because he acted up, but there are multiple problems with that statement. First, as we've seen in many cases where a child is being abused and the parent is saying it's discipline, it tends to become a case where the discipline is being carried out because the child is not completing prior discipline. It's an endless cycle where the so-called discipline is so severe the child can't possibly complete it, and so they're being disciplined again. And it's for things like, quote-unquote, stealing food, but they're only stealing food because the discipline is them being starved. They're being forced to stay awake through the night, but they're so tired they can't help but fall asleep, which to the abusive parent means they're rebelling and need more severe discipline, instead of accepting the reality that the kid's fucking tired. The other problem was that the things that Heather did to Adrian were not what any normal human being would consider discipline. She would force him to sleep outside in the cold. That's already over the line from discipline to abuse, but she would also chain Adrian up like a dog. Then she would set food on the ground just outside of where he could reach it. That was the kind of shit people describe in concentration camps. Any human being who can do that and believe it's a reasonable act of discipline is beyond help. Something in your brain is just not functioning properly. Another thing that's notable about these punishments was that Heather documented them all. She took pictures and videos of her abuses almost as if she enjoyed what she was doing. No parent documents a typical punishment. You think I have pictures of my kids standing in the corner or not being allowed to watch television? No. That wouldn't even occur to me. But Heather was proud of what she was doing and wanted to get it recorded so she could either show it off or relive it. Eventually, social workers began receiving reports of abuse in the Jones home in Missouri, but like in Kansas, they didn't do much. Social workers witnessed Adrian with a black eye, and Heather claimed it was from Michael hitting the boy for wetting himself. That's another problem with abusive parents. Wetting themselves or the bed is a sign that a child is suffering from trauma. Abusive parents live under this delusion that everything a child does is meant to defy them, so they use physical violence as a punishment for wetting themselves, which creates trauma that causes them to wet themselves or the bed. It's always a cycle that could be ended if the parents weren't uneducated pieces of garbage. But I digress. When Adrian was interviewed, the boy described violent abuse by both Michael and Heather, and a note was put in the file that said Adrian was in danger of continued abuse by his father and stepmother. Despite that, Adrian was not removed from the home. It's crazy to think that Adrian was removed from his mother's home because she left the children unsupervised, but he wasn't removed from his father's home after evidence of physical abuse. It's almost impossible to understand how those decisions were made for the same child. The family moved around a bunch, likely in an effort to stall the investigations by Child Services, and at some point they moved to a rural property in Kansas that had a house and a barn. At some point in 2014, Adrian was placed into a residential treatment center based on Heather's claims that he was acting out and she couldn't handle his behavior. While there, he was diagnosed with PTSD. He was 7 years old. Despite that, he was released from the facility on September 4, 2014 and returned to the Jones home. They were supposed to bring Adrian back in for regular checkups, but they failed to do so. Even then, social workers did nothing to check on Adrian or punish the parents for not following the care instructions. In December, Heather posted a message on Facebook that said, quote, "Walking Dead, look at the pretty flowers. Yeah, I'm about to pull that shit." Now, if you don't watch the television show The Walking Dead, there's a scene early on in the show where a character tells a child to look at flowers so she can shoot her in the back of the head. Heather's comment was a direct claim that she wanted to shoot Adrian in the head. Only days later, she posted another message saying she may need to feed a body to pigs. That message would go on to become a reality. A few months before Adrian's death, Michael and Heather started keeping him locked in a shower full-time. It's believed that it was in an effort to keep him from reporting the abuse he was experiencing. They used a piece of plywood to lock him in a tiled shower stall. Heather even took pictures of the cell she had built, because she was proud of what she was doing. Adrian lived full-time in the shower stall, and eventually he tried to claw and even chew his way out. It was another opportunity for Heather to add more photos to her collection. She noticed Adrian trying to get out on one of the many surveillance cameras, and she went into the bathroom to take pictures of his bloody fingertips and broken teeth. In the last few days of his life, he was too weak to hold himself up, so the Joneses strapped him to a chair. They just left him in the shower stall, and eventually he died of starvation. Once Michael and Heather had a dead body in their home, they came up with a plan to make Adrian go away. The property the Joneses lived on had a barn where they had chickens and a few other animals. Almost 2 weeks after Adrian died, Michael bought some pigs and put them in the barn, making sure to not feed them for a period of time so they were good and hungry. Then Michael took Adrian's lifeless body and threw it in with the pigs. If you aren't aware, pigs will eat basically anything, and it's an old crime saying to never trust a man who owns pigs. In November of 2015, police responded to a domestic disturbance call at the home of Michael and Heather Jones. The couple had gotten into a fight, and Michael had fired a gun at Heather, which grazed her arm. They took him into custody for assault and battery, and while there, a neighbor informed the authorities that Adrian hadn't been seen in months. When officers asked if they could look around the property, Heather told them they would find Adrian's remains in the pig pen. When she led police to the pen, there wasn't much left of the child. Authorities also noticed that there were security cameras all over the house. Around 30 cameras caught everything that happened throughout the home. When Heather was arrested, she sent her iCloud login information to her landlord, Jen Hovers, and asked her to save some pictures for her, because that's definitely a priority when you're in jail facing a murder charge. When Jen logged in, what she saw was horrifying. The drive was filled with pictures and videos documenting the severe abuse of Adrian. Everything they had done to the boy was thoroughly documented, and photographs showed a clear progression of starvation. The landlord handed the files over to investigators, and the documentation was used against Michael and Heather. She also pointed investigators to Heather's Facebook page, where she would send messages describing her abuse of Adrian. One message read, quote, "Just strapped the boy to my inversion table with handcuffs and ace bandages and put him downstairs." Heather Jones pleaded guilty to 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of child abuse. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, plus 5 years and 8 months for the child abuse. Michael Jones pleaded guilty to first-degree felony murder and was sentenced to life in prison. He will also have to serve 25 years before he will be eligible for parole. He tried to withdraw his guilty plea and request a jury trial, but eventually accepted the plea deal. It's a strange case because, like many abusive parents, they did blame Adrian for acting out and stealing food, but after he died, they immediately confessed. It's common for monsters like this to go to their grave denying they did anything wrong, but this seemed almost worse. They easily admitted it, like it was no big deal. Adrian's life meant absolutely nothing to them, and hopefully their lack of remorse plays a big role in their future parole hearings. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.